Imagine a private club where presidents, prime ministers, international bankers and generals rub shoulders, and where the people running the wars, the markets, and governments say what they never say in public. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's me, it's Daniel Estulin. Over the past few months, we have received a large volume of emails from our English-speaking community asking us to help people make sense of the world around us. People have this perfectly logical fascination with the old, specifically ancient empires, which today exist in the form of global projects. So today, these global projects compete against each other for global supremacy, and I will help you understand who they are and how we operate. What other areas of interest? Well, transhumanism. What is it? How does it work? And how does it affect humanity going forward? Also, the economy is another obvious area of interest, and many other topics which truly affect not only our lives, but the world around us. And so in this opening episode, we're going to look at the emergence of this transnational power elite, which over time reverberated in the proliferation of these globalist minded think tanks, such as, for example, the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission, for instance, all these secretive transatlantic organizations and meetings, of which we could say the Bilderberg Group is perhaps the most characteristic example of this case of this European unification. Okay, so imagine a private club where presidents and prime ministers and international bankers, representatives of the global ruling class, meet in private and discuss things they could never discuss publicly. Well, this is definition of the Bilderberg Group, and for over 70 years, this was one of the most secretive of any organization worldwide. And the reason that no one is willing to break the group's conspiracy of silence or stand up to it is because the Bilderbergers are simply too powerful to deal with. The secrecy of the Bilderberg Group has captured the imagination of novelists and also Hollywood blockbusters. From a Hollywood blockbuster, The International, to James Bond's Spectre and Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, these films are modeled on these covert organizations, and these films illustrate the fact that whenever regime change is needed anywhere in the world, whether this be based on the need to sustain a welfare state or to correct destabilizing capital flows, it only happens when the world body of power brokers decides to do it and post it on the agenda of their secret or private meetings. The Netherlands Prince Bernhard subscribed to the belief that severe economic dips, like for example the Great Depression, could be avoided if responsible and influential leaders, according to him, would actually manage world events from behind their necessary public posturing. And for this reason, he was asked to organize the first meeting of these like-minded representatives from all facets of the world's economic and political and industrial and military realms back in 1954. And they met at the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, at the outskirts of Amsterdam, the capital of the Netherlands. And at the end of the meeting, the attendees agreed to form this secret association. Now, most reports contend that the original members named their alliance the Bilderberg Group after the hotel where they met for the first time. The hotel in question is the Bilderberg Hotel. At the time was owned by the Dutch royal family, so it's always really very convenient. But there's also another side of the story, why they call themselves the Bilderberg Group. You see, German-born Prince Bernhard was an officer in the Reiter SS Corps in the early 1930s. And he was on the board of the IG subsidiary Farbenbilder. And so Prince Bernhard drew on his Nazi history in corporate management to encourage, as they say, the super secret policy-making group to call themselves the Bilderbergers after Farbenbilder, in memory of the Farben executives' initiative to organize Heinrich Himmler's Circle of Friends, which was the elite wealth-building leaders who amply rewarded Himmler for his protection under nationalist socialist programs from the early days of Hitler's popularity through to the Nazi Germany's defeat. And so the royal Dutch family discreetly, obviously, buried this part of Prince Bernhard's background when, after the war, he became a top official in the Royal Dutch Shell, a Dutch-British conglomerate. Today, this rich European oil company forms part of the inner circle of the Bilderberger elite. So you see, during the first meeting of the Bilderbergers, the founding members dropped their mission and their goals. And according to one observer, they have continued in the same vein. So the intention behind each and all of the Bilderberger meetings was about how to create, according to them, an aristocracy of purpose between European and the United States of America, and how to come to agreements on questions of policy and economics and strategy in jointly ruling the world. And so the NATO alliance was their crucial base of operations and also subversion, because it afforded them the background for their plans of perpetual war, at least for their nuclear blackmail policy. And so in this series, I will illustrate this sampling as we peel the layers of secrecy away and expose the Bilderbergers' true intentions, which incidentally were only too patently clear to the then French President General Charles de Gaulle. In his October 1967 newsletter, political investigator Roger Menevie analyzed the Bilderbergers' relationship with Charles de Gaulle. He began his report with an astonishing observation that all of the French personalities who had associated themselves with the Bilderberg group, such as, for example, Georges Pompidou, Antoine Pinay, Guy Mollet, were also the strongest opponents of Charles de Gaulle's nuclear policy known as the Force de Frappe. Pompidou was the prime minister, Pinay and Mollet were ministers in the French government. Now, why this alliance? Because one of the main objectives of the Bilderberg group was to submit the sovereignty of the free nations of Europe to a Bilderberger-controlled British American World War government, using a nuclear threat as a kind of a battering ram against the rest of the unwilling world. And in order to control Europe, it was vital to eliminate France's nuclear deterrent, even when that deterrent was absolutely vital in containing the Soviet nuclear threat. And General de Gaulle's biographer, Jean Le Coton, wrote that de Gaulle had to establish an incontrovertible position of strength in Europe against Britain's free trade orientation towards this new world imperial order. And this is why France had to be one of the three pillars of a free world, as opposed to one of the columns of the European temple. And so if we analyze the agenda items of the Bilderberger meetings since its first meeting back in 1954, what stands out remarkably is the attempt to manage and bring under control differences in ideology among American and European aristocracies with respect to how these two groups should go about controlling the global events. For example, page 7 of the 1955 Bilderberger meeting, general report speaks of removal of misunderstanding and possible suspicion between the countries of Western Europe and the United States in the face of dangers which beset the world. And so, since 1954, the Bilderbergers have represented the elite and the absolute wealth of all Western nations, the financiers, the industrialists, the bankers, the politicians, the business leaders of multinational corporations, presidents, prime ministers, finance ministers, state secretaries, World Bank and International Monetary Fund representatives, presidents of world media conglomerates, and also, needless to say, military leaders. You see, back in September 2005, in a kind of precedent-setting gesture to countermand accusations of a Bilderberger group conspiracy, the group's chairman at the time, Viscount Etienne Davignon, gave an interview to the British BBC, and in it he presented, let's say, a more benign purpose for the group's private meetings. He said, "I simply think it's people who have influence, interested to speak to other people who have influence in a forum that allows them to speak freely and to examine their differences of opinion without criticism and public debate over their views." And so Davignon has denied the Bilderbergers want to establish a global ruling class, because he said, "I don't think a global ruling class exists." Instead, he contends business influences society and politics obviously influences society. That's purely common sense. He said, it's not that business contends the right of democratically elected leaders to lead. Let's see. Wars have usually been fought over expanding territory, but in this new era of globalization, where business and politics co-depend for survival, economic control dominates. And so, regardless of the Bilderberger chairman's claims, there is no doubt the group wields economic control over world trade. And the fact remains, the public, we, the public, we're not privy to the proceedings of the annual meetings, they need for secrecy to discuss global strategy and to reach a consensus on a wide range of issues. But is this how it works? And so Bilderberg members run the central banks and are therefore in a position to determine discount rates, money supply levels, interest rates, and the price of gold, as well as which countries receive loans. And so by manipulating money up and down the business chain, the Bilderbergers create billions of dollars for themselves. And that's called the ideology of money, nothing personal. You see, every US president since Eisenhower has belonged to the Bilderberg group, not that they have all attended the meetings personally, but they've sent their representatives. Another member is now the ex-Prime Minister Tony Blair, as well as most of the principal members of the British government. Even Canada's high-profile past Prime Minister, Pierre Trudeau, the father of the current Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, was a member of the Bilderberg group. And so past Bilderberger attendees are, for example, Alan Greenspan, former chairman of the Federal Reserve, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton before he became president of the United States, John Kerry, Belinda, Bill Gates, etc., etc. Also members of the people who control what you watch and what you read. They have protected the secrecy of this private society, and this may be why the name Bilderberg is not as well known as it should be. You see, no matter where you look, governments, big business, and any other institution seeking to exercise control, their key to control is secrecy. Meetings such as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, G7, World Trade Organization, World Economic Forum, central banks, European Union, Council of Ministers, European Union Commission, EU summits, government cabinet meetings, numerous think tanks, etc., they're always conducted behind closed doors. And the only possible reason for this is that they don't want you to know exactly what they're discussing. And that well-worn excuse for keeping things under wraps, it's not in public's interest, really means that it's not in the interest of the institutions in power for the public to know what they're discussing and deciding. And so beyond this common reluctance to reveal the proceedings of meetings, the secrecy principle extends to the forums and meetings themselves. In other words, by and large, we don't even know that these meetings are taking place, let alone what is being planned and discussed in. For example, there is a World Economic Forum in Davos in January. The Bilderbergers at G7 meeting is in April and May. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank annual conference in September. And so you have a kind of international consensus emerges and is carried over from one meeting to the next, but no one is really leading. And so this consensus becomes the background for G7 economic communique. It becomes what informs the International Monetary Fund when it imposes an adjustment program in Argentina, and becomes what the United States president proposes to Congress. According to the Bilderbergers' draft document of 1989, their first meeting grew out of the concern expressed by many leading citizens on both sides of the Atlantic that Western Europe and North America were not working together as closely as they should be on matters of critical importance. It was felt that regular, off-the-record discussions would help create what they call a better understanding of these complex forces and major trends affecting Western nations in a difficult post-Second World period. And so Lord Rothschild and Lawrence Rockefeller, key members of two of the most powerful families in the world, personally handpicked 100 of the world's elite of the secret purpose of regionalizing Europe. According to Giovanni Agnelli, the now deceased head of Fiat, also said, European integration is our goal, and where the politicians have failed, we industrialists hope to succeed. No policy is made here, it's all talk. Some of it is banal, said Will Hutton, London editor of The Observer, who participated himself in the 1997 Bilderberg meeting. But he said the consensus established as the backdrop against which policy is made worldwide. And so according to the founder, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, as quoted in Aldo Hutch's authorized biography of the prince, each Bilderberger attendee is magically stripped of his office upon entering the meeting, becoming a simple citizen of the country for the duration of the conference. Prince Bernhard, who died in the year 2004, was the father of Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands and also a close friend and associate of Britain's Prince Philip. And so when these representatives of the Western establishment leave a Bilderberg meeting, he said, they carry the group's consensus with them, and the high-powered Bilderberger debates are intended to build unity by resolving differences and therefore certainly have a significant influence on attendees. Indeed, from the moment the Bilderberg conference closed, what seems to happen almost by accident or by chance, if you believe in coincidence or conspiracy theories, is that the consensus reached in different areas of discussions at the Bilderberg annual meeting are wholeheartedly promoted by these all-powerful political and commercial interests through the mainstream media, while simultaneously becoming common policy to government internationals, obviously of governments of seemingly different persuasions.